on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning, one and all. Happy Thursday. It is 5:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news. I am Andrew Langer, in for the vacationing Larry O'Connor. We got a great show today. We're going to be joined by Charisse Trump, the Executive Director of Speech First. We're going to be talking with Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies. Matt Foldy is going to help us unpack just what in the good Lord's name was happening with Arlington National Cemetery and celebrating the lives of those who gave their lives in service to this country in Afghanistan. We got KT McFarland joining us. Link Lauren, the former RFK Jr. advisor, is going to help us unpack the CNN debate tonight. I am joined, and so grateful for this, Mercedes Schlapp, fresh off of CPAC Mexico. Mercy, you doing all right there?
You know, I'm trying to recover from some of the tequila. You know, Mexico's known for tequila in their country. No,
yes,
actually,
no
I'm
good
kidding.
Decisions. I've never made a good decision ever on tequila. So
the Mexicans, they go. They don't sleep much. I was like, guys, I gotta sleep, but it was a huge success. We had, Tulsi Gabbard was with us. Rick Grinnell. Wow. President Trump gave a great message, sent a great message as well. And I got to tell you, the big thing there, Andrew, is the fact that you've seen these countries in Latin America really take a turn to the left. And these conservatives across the Latin American region, they all tell us the same thing. Not only do they wear their MAGA hats, make America great again, but secondly, that they're like, Donald Trump needs to win, because with a strong America, with a strong president, that means that there is hope for democracy in Latin America, because we know Walz and Harris, obviously, yes. Harris and Walz, they, by what they have done under the Biden administration has really moved over in shifting and pressuring these countries into moving more to the far left. So this is fascinating insight into that. This is
why tonight's interview is so vitally important, even if she does have the crutch. Harris has the crutch of having Tim Walz there. Having the two of them there on, I mean, emotional support vice president.
He's kind of like a golden doodle at times,
yes, exactly.
He's
like, exactly it.
Well, the golden doodles are a lot cuter. Let's be real.
That's exactly it. But my it's one of those things where we don't know what Dana Bash is going to do in terms of the questions. We have certain expectations. We know that in the end, right tonight, no matter how poorly Kamala performs, she's going to get rave reviews from the major media. But my point in bringing this up to dovetail the two together is that, she has got a lot to answer for. Even if, listen, let's assume for a moment that she was not the border czar, which we know that she was. And that she was in charge of the sort of the dealing with the root causes of net migration from Latin America to the United States. She failed miserably there. She's got some accountability. I mean, you've been talking to these leaders, Mercy. I mean, this is, she's got a lot to answer for, doesn't she?
Well, you know what's so embarrassing? What's so embarrassing is that this is what the news is. The first interview. It's exactly how CNN has branded it. The first interview. It's like she has been vice president for the past 3.5 years. The last time she did a news conference was back in December of 2023.
Wow.
And then we're all making it seem like this is the biggest deal because it is her first interview. It is the responsibility of a nominee to be answering the tough questions day in and day out. And I just read this yesterday, a poll basically saying that over 90% of Americans agree you should have to answer the tough questions. Right. So this idea of how the left has tried, and her campaign have tried to control her narrative because they're so worried she's going to step right into it. She can't even go on her own to do this interview. She has to have her puppy lapdog,
emotional support vice president.
Emotional support vice president to basically answer these questions. The other thing is, we know, Andrew, she is so light on policy. She doesn't know how to explain it. She completely is either doing a copycat of Donald Trump's policies, or when she's talking about these policies like the economy, which she has little to no understanding how the American economy works. It is incredibly troubling to watch. So I think that this propaganda of them trying to keep her like under wraps, no interview, we're giving one interview to the friendliest network, is just all a sham. It's all a sham.
Well, it's a situation in which, the other day, I don't remember who it was. Somebody on TV was talking about the DNC and saying that Kamala Harris was not an ideologue. And it was obviously nothing could be further from the truth, because we are starting to really unpack just what Kamala Harris was involved in as Vice President of the United States. And I'll give you one example, Mercy. You and me, and our colleagues at CPAC, we've been working on an issue having to do with intellectual property rights and the pharmaceuticals, drug makers and drug manufacturers. And, Kamala Harris was talking in 2019 about seizing patents, in the name of drug prices. Mm-hmm. And nobody was doing anything on it until 2023, until the Biden administration all of a sudden enunciated that they wanted to seize patents in the name of drug prices. And so the point is, I want somebody to ask Kamala Harris, about this issue. Yeah. You said this in 2019. This is what happened in 2023, 2024. They're not gonna do that tonight. We're not gonna get anything on this. This Megyn Kelly, Mercy. Megyn Kelly may have said it best. I'm calling him an emotional support vice president. Megyn Kelly went a step further. Let's play. Go ahead and play cut number one.
It doesn't inspire confidence in me as a woman. I mean, everyone's supposed to be celebrating that she could be our first female president, and she can't even do a sit-down interview on her own. I got news for you, Madam Harris. That's not how the presidency is supposed to work. You actually are a single individual imbued with a lot of power. Go read Article 2. And you don't get to do it with your binky right next to you. Your big white blankie for every interview. That's what he is. That actually works perfectly. I used to have a big white blankie that I carried everywhere. He happens to be white, and he is her big white blankie that she needs in order to talk to the press.
The BWB. Tim Waltz, the BWB. I mean,
the big white blankie. I love it. And the pacifier. There's these images. Wow. Yeah, look, I think she's absolutely right. It is the most stressful job. It is the most it's the most demanding job you can ever imagine. And the reality is you have to be held accountable for the decisions that you make. You can't just hide behind the joyful curtain that we saw in display last week at the Democrat National Convention.
Hold on. Let's be really clear. They're saying it's joyful. They are insistent that it is joyful. I didn't find it particularly joyful. I found it to be all about demagoguing and instilling fear and talking about threats. I found it to be a very angry and not the opposite of. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mercy.
No. I think they really tried to make it a point of the president of joy. I mean, that was the big message coming out of it. They're trying to make her tough on crime, tough on the border, tough. Great for the economy with socialist tactics that they're going to put in line. That's the way they tried to orchestrate it. The problem is you can't be throwing out policy, especially when it comes to the economy, which I believe, Andrew, is her weakest area. So it'll be interesting to see if Dana Bash is really going to ask the tough questions on the economy. She might ask one or two. I have a feeling this is all going to turn out to be about how Donald Trump is a meanie and a bully, and he's so mean to you because you're a black woman or a black Indian woman, and that's where I fear it's going to go.
We're going to continue this conversation to talk about what we think Dana Bash is going to focus on, because I think you're right, and I think it is going to be a focus on joy. It's going to be a softball thing. We'll talk about Tim Waltz's role in all of this as well. But first, it's 5:15 a.m.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Well, so, something. What do we do? I don't know if we're necessarily. So let's hear it again. This is great. I've been calling him the emotional support vice president, but Megyn Kelly really calls out Kamala Harris on this. Let's play cut number one.
It doesn't inspire confidence in me as a woman. I mean, everyone's supposed to be celebrating that she could be our first female president, and she can't even do a sit-down interview on her own. I got news for you, Madam Harris. That's not how the presidency is supposed to work. You actually are a single individual imbued with a lot of power. Go read Article 2. And you don't get to do it with your binky right next to you. Your big white blankie for every interview. That's what he is. That actually works perfectly. I used to have a big white blankie that I carried everywhere. He happens to be white, and he is her big white blankie that she needs in order to talk to the press.
I love it. And you know, it's interesting, right? Because the left, Mercy, has been saying, the leftist press has been saying, well, traditionally, the first interview that the president and the vice president do, or the nominees do, is together. Yeah, they do that just after the vice president has gotten nominated, and usually both of them have done interviews ad nauseum beforehand. I mean, there's a total reinvention here as to what's going on. But I predicted this on the air. I knew that she was going to go down this road. I mean, this really is, Tim Walz has been acting not as the coach and not as the Midwestern dad. Matt, your husband, is the Midwestern dad.
Yes.
But Tim Walz is her attack dog. That's what they need her there for, just to run interference, isn't it?
What I'm looking for in this interview is, will they be able to really kind of end each other's sentences? It's kind of like, it's almost like I call it like the first interview or like the first date, right? Like,
yeah.
Like when you've been with the person for a long time, Andrew, you with your wife, and, you finish each other's sentences. Like,
oh, yes.
And I find like there will be gaps where it's going to be interesting to watch if they really understand fully the policy, the implementation, what their vision is for America, because they haven't been together for a long time. And so, yeah, they've done these cringy interviews where they're like, yeah, what's your favorite ice cream? And what are you doing? I mean, it's like
Sure.
them two together.
The
They're like interviewing
stuff,
each
yes.
other. They're like,
Yeah.
you're so great. I'm so great. I mean, it'd be like you and I interviewing each other. Come on. And here you have this weirdness that I think can happen, where you're going to see a lot of this giggling back and forth, like, no, you answer. No,
Yeah.
you answer. I mean, can't you picture this pathetic interview happening? I
Right,
mean,
yeah,
it's insane.
It's going to be a situation, and the most important thing is this issue of the questions, but, and whether or not Tim Walz will serve as the deflection point, right? Is he going to be the guy who's going to step in there? Because you're absolutely correct. What you said before was spot on. It's not just, we know what Kamala Harris's ideology is. We know the dangerous things that she believes and the policies that they've been implementing, but we know that her weakness is being able to explain it to the American people. Tim Walz, may be the person who steps in there and explains the nonsense that Kamala Harris wants to say. That's a problem. Scott Jennings has done some great work on CNN in recent weeks. Here he is talking about the weak sauce of Kamala Harris doing this with Tim Walz. Let's go ahead and play that.
Is the line now going to be, well, why isn't she doing it by herself?
Yeah, I do think people are going to bring that up. Like, I have great confidence in Dana and CNN to do this. I think it's incredibly weak sauce to show up with your running mate. The fact that they don't have enough confidence in her to let her sit herself, the actual top of the ticket, and do a single interview. In fact, I think the hand-wringing and the gyrations over this over the last month show a troubling lack of confidence in her political ability, which also makes you wonder as a voter, well, what kind of president would you be if this kind of a small-time decision, can we do an interview or not, what does that look like for your decision-making process, so on? So, I think Republicans are going to think it's pretty weak to show up with effectively someone to take up half the time.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. So, listen, I want to get into that, and I want to get into the flip-flops. There's a guy on Twitter named Mazemore who did a wonderful series on the various flip-flops of this administration. But I want to talk about Kamala Harris flip-flopping and why this is so important, because we don't know what Kamala Harris stands for anymore. We've got so much more to get to. Right now, it's 5:22 here on So we're going to get the interview tonight. It's not the interview we want. It's not the interview we expected, but it's an interview. And it's a reset, right? Because Kamala Harris has essentially repudiated everything that she said before. I don't know. Or she's doubled down on the most dastardly of the economic plans. But it's these flip-flops, Mercy, that we need to get answers to. Do you think we're going to get them?
First of all, I'll be curious to see if Dana Bash uses the word flip-flop,
sure.
Right? Like, she probably won't. And so, but we have seen, especially when it comes to the issue of the economy, where she said she was going to support the Green New Deal that included a federal jobs guarantee. Now the campaign is saying that no, she no longer supports the federal jobs guarantee. And energy, she had endorsed the nationwide ban on oil and gas fracking. Now the campaign is saying, well, she doesn't support a total ban, of course, because that's targeting areas like Pennsylvania. They said she co-sponsored that Zero Emissions Vehicles Act. Well, now the campaign is saying it's a lie. She doesn't support these EV mandates, these electric vehicle mandates. I mean, the list goes on, in terms of what she supported back then to now, and how they really have tried to shift her into this center space, this moderate space when it comes to policy. But I got to tell you, it is just not. I mean, you know what it brings me back to, Andrew?
What?
It brings me back to the Bush-Dukakis race.
Right.
And it was Dukakis would flip-flop, and it left the American people saying, well, wait a second, what does she really believe? What does she really believe? Which I know hurt Dukakis in that race.
Yeah, listen, it would be great if we could get Kamala Harris on top of a tank with that helmet on her head.
Ooh.
That would be
Wow. Yeah.
But maybe we should, something in the world of AI. Listen, I know we're not supposed to.
In the world of
AI, I think somebody needs to make this picture. In fact,
I think we'll work on that. Let me get CPAC on it now.
There you go. I need from your mouth to God's ear and straight around to the box office. Listen, we've got all kinds of things going up. We're going to continue to talk about this through the show today, to say the least. But in the next half hour, we've got to talk about the Supreme Court yesterday. I mean, again, we talk about the flip-flopping, but the end of the day, the Democrats are still the Democrats. They're still trying to do an end run around the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court pushed back yesterday. I am Andrew Langer. I'm in for Larry O'Connor, and this, of course, is O'Connor and Company on WMAL.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, it is 5:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Making sense of the news. A good Thursday morning to one and all. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor alongside Mercedes Schlapp. Good morning, Mercy.
Good morning. And I was about to say Larry because it's my
That's all right.
customary name. But Andrew, this is so much fun.
Yeah, it's always good to hang out. So we got lots going on. We've got Mark Krikorian joining us at 6:35 today from the Center for Immigration Studies. Matt Foldy is going to help us unpack just what's going on with this kerfuffle at Arlington. You do something nice for people, and the PC police just had their knives out for you. KT McFarland is joining us, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump and the author of Revolution. Link Lauren, who's an internet personality and former RFK Jr. advisor, is going to join us to get their perspective on to give us their perspective on tonight's CNN interview. And then, of course, we've got Cherise Trump, Executive Director of Speech First. She's joining us at 6:05 to talk about this Supreme Court decision yesterday. The Biden-Harris administration tried to do yet another end run around the Supreme Court on student loans. This gets into the economics of what they're doing, apparently not understanding that when you forgive student loans, this makes things more expensive. But yesterday, not that the Supreme Court is weighing in on that, they're just weighing in on the constitutionality of this. They said they Wednesday rebuffed a Biden administration plea seeking to revive the latest plan to, they say, tackle student loan debt. For me, it was a very naked attempt to try to pay off a bunch of young people as we move into the election cycle. This should not be surprising, should it, Mercy, that the Supreme Court did this?
Not at all. Look, they have this obsession with paying everyone's student loan debt, and that being the Democrats. This has been one of their targets, one of their what they want to fulfill as their campaign promises, really to target the younger voter. We know that part of that Democrat coalition is the young voter, as is black voters, Hispanic voters, women, etc. These single women for the most part. But really, when it comes to the young voters, think about all the cringy videos that they're doing on TikTok. What is it, that brat little dance or something?
Oh, yeah.
Which is just...
Yeah, Brat Summer.
Gosh, it's so cringy. So, the idea is the Supreme Court has made the decision. They refuse to revive this Biden's student loan debt relief plan. This is never going to end. They want to, Biden has been pushing this, like trying to be the one to say, no, wait a second, we can keep moving this forward. But the court, they basically denied this emergency request that was filed by the administration that would lift a nationwide injunction that was imposed by the appeals court. So, look, this is all a political play from the Joe Biden and from Kamala Harris. And plus, it's bad policy. We don't need to be paying kids student loans. Like, what about those people that end up becoming plumbers, those young people that now are moving more into the vocational type of jobs, as opposed to just going to college to, be indoctrinated as a Marxist? I don't know. We shouldn't pay for that. I don't know.
Well,
Andrew. What do you think?
It's threefold, right? I mean, let's start with the issue of whether or not it should be within the federal government's purview to do this, and taking money from working families and folks who've either saved for their education or folks who are choosing to not go to college, chose not to go to college, chose to work, didn't take out these kinds of loans. But then there's this thing that nobody seems to understand, which is when the federal government sends a signal to universities, hey, we're going to guarantee this, no matter what the size of the loan that somebody takes out, we're going to guarantee this. Well, that's a signal to the universities that they can raise their tuition costs. It's just like what we were talking about with Kamala talking about the housing credit, right? The $25,000 housing credit. Well, we know that's just going to raise the cost of housing even more. It's just going to, because, hey, we can charge more because the federal government is going to pay this portion of it.
Exactly.
It is a.
And what's disgusting is that these universities, many of them have big endowments.
Right.
They spend their money on fancy buildings, on tenure for the professors that sit around, and some of them are good, but some of them very much leftist of left. I don't know how many parents have come up to me at CPAC and said, I sent my kid to college and he came back a flaming liberal, and literally almost in tears that this has happened, that we have lost that generation of kids. I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of great conservative kids out there, because I think they've seen under the COVID lockdowns that, government decision making and government control and this kind of authoritarian behavior is actually horrific. And you know what? We were having this conversation about, the fact that having to help kids pay for utility bills because it's so expensive, or like paying for college books. It's so expensive for these kids. It's just simply unaffordable. And this is how they're going to do it. The Biden-Harris folks are going to bail them out from these ridiculous student loans that, quite frankly, the universities should help pay for.
Without a doubt. I mean, and I think that's exactly it. As we talk about this, we know college is expensive. We need to be ensuring that we're not creating policies that are going to make college more expensive. But I think you're right. There's got to be some signal that is sent to these universities that they've got to be on the hook for this, that if there is some kind of an outsized loan a debt that a student takes out and the universities are not helping them get to find work in their relevant field that actually pays them what they need to get paid, then the universities need to be put on the hook for this. Otherwise, right, what's the point of having massive endowments if not to actually help those students who need it? I mean, this is where we are. But the other part of this, of course, is this issue of the constitutionality. We have a system of checks and balances. We have a system of separation of powers. I'm guided in this, Mercy, in the work that I do with you at CPAC and the CPAC Foundation by a very basic precept. The 1992 Supreme Court case, in which they said this: the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we might resist the temptation to concentrate power in one branch as the expedient solution of the crisis of the day. We're going to get into this about the separation of powers. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about here on the show. We're going to be joined in the next hour by Charisse Trump from Speech First to talk about this. It is 5:40.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 p.m.
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
So we've got Mark Krikorian joining us from the Center for Immigration Studies to talk about the ongoing crisis at the border. I mean, to hear it, right? To hear it, Mercy. There is no crisis of the border, but there's no crisis. There's nothing wrong here with saying to folks, hey, We're going to give you a bunch of free stuff if you come to the United States. Oh, and we're going to offer you the possibility of amnesty here. But we got this story out of Fairfax County, Mercy. The Fairfax County Sheriff Stacey Kincaid signed a policy that says if the sheriff's office receives an immigration detainer and the illegal immigrant has been identified as eligible for immediate release or is locally sentenced and has a scheduled release date, ICE shall not be notified and the inmate will be released to the street. What could possibly go wrong with this?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it is a complete and absolute disaster. You know, I was reading through what's happening here in Fairfax with the fact that the Fairfax sheriff they put out those, the regulations basically say you don't need to contact ICE.
Right.
You don't need to if you get an illegal immigrant. And then we've seen the cases of this one man who committed several sexual crimes in Virginia, illegal from Bolivia. And guess what? He's released into the community. It just shows the brokenness of our system. This happens time and time again. It's why you have these cases like Laken Riley. You've seen the cases of the mother in Maryland who was brutally raped and murdered. These are crimes that should never happen in America. We should not allow these criminals to come into our country. They have no place here. And the mere fact is it's because of the brokenness of the federal government when it comes to immigration, and particularly these Biden-Harris laws and policies that have just failed time and time again.
It's a situation, and I talk about this, we've all talked about this quite a bit, the idea of a phrase that I use, the most well-intentioned policies eventually bump against very real realities. Or as my father says it, there are many roads to utopia, however, all must traverse the surface of the earth. The idea that you can go down this road, and again, let's assume for a moment that their intentions are pure. They're not, but let's assume for a moment their intentions are pure. The idea that you would take somebody who has been picked up for a crime, who is not present in the United States illegally, not hold them accountable for that underlying crime, and then release them back into the community. I mean, it doesn't serve anybody at all. I mean, this idea, the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office is in charge of enforcing the law. That's the role of their law. And I understand federalism to the nth degree, but it doesn't help anybody to release them, least of all the immigrant communities that a lot of these folks go back to. How does this help the immigrant Bolivian community in Fairfax County for someone convicted of child sex crimes in Virginia, for that person to then be released back into the community?
Yeah, and I think this is something that, quite frankly, I do hope Governor Glenn Youngkin address this issue, and Attorney General Jason Miyares. They need to step in to say, we're not going to allow this. I know this is federal jurisdiction, but this is something that cannot be allowed in our community. Andrew, did you see those videos of the one in Colorado where you have the Venezuelan gang members with like ginormous guns, like going into these apartment buildings, telling people they need to move out because they're coming in and taking over? I mean, this is happening in Aurora, Colorado. It's like there has been, when I tell you, almost this like chaos happening, especially in these cities where the illegal immigrants have taken over sections. And I know this for a fact because I was talking to a Spanish reporter from Telemundo, and she told me the Venezuelan, even criminal gangs, have taken over homelessness shelters in Washington, D.C., pushing out the black residents who have been there forever. And it's insane. They're selling drugs on the streets. You talk about increased crime, and nothing is done. The mayor of D.C., when she was asked at a press conference about it, kind of just said, kind of ignored it, like trying to be like, well, we welcome, immigrants to come to this country. They are so scared of offending the illegal immigrant that what's happening is that the criminals are basically taking charge in several of these communities. It's quite scary.
It is a situation in which you're talking about two very different views of the world and a massive, I like to, and I'm a nerd here, massive Jedi mind trick that is being played on the American people. Don't believe what's in front of your eyes. Believe what I'm telling you. And one of the things, and it gets to this issue of the flip-flopping here, right, is you've got Harris saying for years, right, that the wall is nothing more than an ineffective vanity project. Tim Walz turning around and saying, "Hey, if we do build this wall, I'm going to bring a 30-foot ladder down there to help people over the wall." And now, of course, you've got Kamala Harris saying, or Kamala Harris putting in ads pictures of Trump's border wall and saying that she's going to do this. I mean, and the problem is that there are Americans who are going to believe this. That's the scary part of this, is there are Americans who are going to believe that she has changed her stripes on this, and of course she hasn't, has she?
No, I mean, it goes back to the fact that with Harris, it was kind of interesting watching the DNC, Andrew, where they were like, she's going to be so tough on crime, and it's Trump's fault that because they didn't pass that border security bill in Congress. Look, the reality is that border security bill in Congress would have done nothing.
Right.
It would have been more of the same when it came to catch and release. It would have pushed more people through the ports of entry, maybe, but then you're allowing thousands of people to come in where they don't have documentation. There is not the proper vetting. We truly have no idea who's coming to this country. And what aggravates me is that you're talking 300,000 children are missing under the watch of Biden and Kamala's ruling, basically, administration, in terms of their inability to track down so many of these children that we know are involved in sex trafficking, that are victims of sex trafficking. And so they are responsible for this problem. And I got to tell you, for them to have the audacity to be like, yeah, what's the latest I heard? That Kamala, Andrew, is going to actually provide funding for border wall after she herself called it Trump's vanity project.
Right.
I mean, give me a break.
That's exactly it. There's a certain degree of desperation that is at work here. We're going to get answers to all these questions from Mark Krikorian, who's going to join us at 6:35 in a little bit.